The hum of the 42nd floor was usually the sound of power, but tonight it was a prelude to execution, and the man wiping down my glass partition was wearing the key to my destruction. I didn't notice the tattoo until I mocked him, sealing the fate of the executive I pretended to be. The fluorescent lights of the corporate skyscraper always hummed with a kind of sterile, late-night malice. It was nearly 11 p.m., and I was pulling another marathon session trying to salvage the Q3 projections, fueled by lukewarm coffee and the sheer terror of disappointing Mr. Henderson. My corner office on the 42nd floor offered a sweeping, glittering view of the city, a view that usually felt empowering, but tonight it just felt isolating. The cleaning crew had started their rounds about an hour earlier. I usually ignored them, a silent, necessary background presence, but tonight one of them was closer than usual, pushing his cart down the hallway just outside my glass partition. He was an older gentleman, maybe late 60s, moving with a slow, deliberate rhythm. He wore the standard gray uniform, his face obscured by the shadows cast by the angled overhead lighting. I sighed, rubbing my tired eyes, and noticed my desk phone ringing. A blocked number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something snagged my attention. The janitor had stopped directly outside my office door. He wasn't looking in, just meticulously wiping down the brass plaque engraved with my name. Finally, I muttered, picking up the phone with an impatient flick of my wrist. "Yes, this is Alex. What is it?" The voice on the other end was digitally distorted, a tinny, mechanical rasp that made the hairs on my arms stand up. "You shouldn't be working so late, Mr. Sterling. It's not good for your complexion." My heart gave a violent lurch against my ribs. "Who is this? How did you get this number?" I scanned the hallway immediately. The janitor was still there, his back rigid. He hadn't moved. "Oh, we know everything about everyone here, Alex, especially the ones who forget where they came from." That phrase, "where they came from," hit me like a physical blow. It was an obscure reference, something only a handful of people from my college days, the really dark, regrettable days, would ever use. I glanced back at the janitor. He slowly straightened up, his head still tilted down, his movements almost unnervingly smooth. "Look, buddy, I don't know what you're talking about. If this is about money, always about money with you, isn't it?" The voice sneered. "You forgot that some debts aren't paid in dollars, Alex. Some are paid in loyalty." My breath hitched. This wasn't a prank. This was targeted. I slammed my palm down on the desk, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. "You need to stop calling this number, or I'm contacting security." "Security?" The voice laughed, a dry, hacking sound. "Go ahead. Let them sweep the halls. They might miss something important." I hung up abruptly. The silence in the office was deafening, broken only by the persistent low hum of the ventilation system. I had to see who was out there. I needed to see the face of the person who knew my secrets. I stood up, my expensive leather chair protesting with a squeak. I walked slowly to the glass partition, my knuckles white as I gripped the frame. I needed to look composed, professional, like the high-powered executive I pretended to be. The older man was still there, polishing the wall beside the doorframe, his shoulder barely inches from my view. I cleared my throat loudly, projecting authority. "Excuse me," I called out, my voice betraying a slight tremor. "You're blocking the entrance. Could you please move along to the next office?" He didn't jump. He didn't even flinch. He simply stopped his task. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, he began to turn. The overhead light caught the side of his face, illuminating the deep grooves etched around his eyes, the weary set of his jaw. He looked like every tired immigrant father I'd ever seen rushing to catch the last train. Utterly unremarkable. "Just finishing up here, sir," he mumbled, his voice thick and accented, entirely different from the distorted rasp on the phone. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Relief, sudden and overwhelming, washed over me. "Right. Well, hurry along then. I need to leave soon." I offered a tight, dismissive smile, the kind I reserved for subordinates who annoyed me. "And please, try not to smudge the glass so much next time. This entire floor is high-end material, you know." He paused, his back still mostly to me, but I saw the slight stiffening of his shoulders. He let out a sound that might have been a sigh, or perhaps just the sound of old machinery shifting. "Yes, sir," he replied, the deference in his voice grating on my nerves. "These things are hard to keep clean." He resumed wiping the wall, moving towards the corner of the partition. I watched him, feeling foolish for jumping to conclusions based on a crank call. I turned back to my desk, ready to gather my laptop bag, when a flicker of movement caught my peripheral vision. The man had moved to the vertical support column separating my office from the neighboring one. He had pulled his worn work gloves halfway off his left hand, exposing his skin as he gripped the metal frame to steady himself while reaching high up to clean a spot near the ceiling. And that's when I saw it. It wasn't a smudge. It wasn't dirt. Etched clearly onto the pale, wrinkled skin just below his wrist, stark against the grime of the workday, was a tattoo. It wasn't the messy, fading ink of a sailor or a biker. This was crisp, black, and meticulously detailed. A serpent coiled around a single stylized rose, the emblem of the only fraternity I had ever belonged to, the one I swore I left behind 20 years ago when I got my first real job. The fraternity whose initiation ritual involved a secret oath and a very specific, very permanent mark for those who failed to uphold the code. My blood turned to ice water. I recognized the design instantly. It was my mark, the mark I thought only 3 other living people knew about, and the man scrubbing my office wall wore it too. I stumbled backward, knocking my heavy leather briefcase to the floor with a deafening thud. The sound seemed to echo throughout the entire empty floor. The janitor froze. He slowly lowered his hand, but he didn't turn around. I could hear his breathing, shallow and quick now, the careful cadence of his movements completely gone. He knew I had seen it. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The distorted phone call hadn't been a threat from an outsider. It was a message from someone already inside, someone I had dismissed, looked down on, and just moments ago, mocked. I managed to whisper, my voice a ragged croak. "Who? Who are you?" The man didn't answer immediately. He slowly peeled off his other glove. Then, with terrifying slowness, he began to peel off the gray uniform shirt, letting it drop to the polished marble floor, revealing the defined, muscular torso beneath. And across his chest, dominating the space where his heart should be, was a second, much larger tattoo, the full crest of the Brotherhood, the one reserved for those who had taken the ultimate oath. He finally turned, and the tired, unassuming face was gone. In its place was a look of pure, cold fury. His eyes, deep-set and piercing, locked onto mine. "You remember the night you walked away from the fire, Alex," he said, his real voice now, clear, educated, and chillingly familiar. "You remember what you promised if you ever saw us again?" His real voice. It hit me like a sonic boom in the dead silence of the skyscraper. It wasn't just familiar, it was the voice of the only person I thought I'd successfully erased from my past. Mark Davies. My pledge brother, my roommate, the man who was supposed to have died in that warehouse fire 20 years ago, the fire I'd used as my convenient, dramatic exit from the Brotherhood and everything that entailed. I hadn't just walked away from the fire, I'd left him locked inside the back room to handle the fallout while I took the emergency exit with the briefcase full of seed money. "Mark," I choked out, stumbling back until my legs hit the edge of my mahogany desk. The view of the glittering city seemed to warp and swim behind him. "No, that's impossible. You died. I saw the wreckage." A cruel, sharp smile cracked across his face, making the tattoos look even more menacing against his skin. "Did you, Alex? Did you really check? Or were you too busy polishing your shiny new executive suit and convincing yourself that your future was worth more than my life?" He took a deliberate step closer, the expensive Italian leather of my carpet muffling the sound of his heavy work boots. I thought you were gone," I stammered, reaching instinctively for the heavy crystal paperweight on my desk, my only potential weapon. "The police report." "The police report was your masterpiece, Alex," Mark interrupted, his voice rising in intensity. "You covered your tracks perfectly, burned the evidence, paid off the right city councilman, and then bought yourself a ticket straight into the stratosphere of corporate finance. All while I was left to rot in the anonymity of county lockup. then the streets, and then I started rebuilding. Because unlike you, Alex, I never forgot what we built. His eyes raked over my office, the original art, the Italian leather, the breathtaking view of the city that I lorded over every day. All this, he spat the word out, is built on the foundation of betrayal. My betrayal. And you never even had the decency to send a postcard. The phone rang again. It was the same distorted, mechanical voice from before. This time, I didn't hesitate. I snatched the receiver, ready to argue, ready to fight. "Don't bother yelling into that," the voice rasped. "It's just a distraction." Mark didn't look at the phone. He was watching me, his expression a mask of grim satisfaction. He walked behind my desk, moving with the fluid grace of a predator who had spent years honing his skills in the shadows. He leaned down, picking up the heavy briefcase I'd dropped, the one containing the sensitive Q3 projections that represented my entire career. "You need to leave now, Alex," Mark said, his voice dropping back to a low, guttural tone, almost a whisper directly into my ear. "Go home. Tell your wife you're taking a sudden vacation, because you have exactly 30 minutes before the entire digital world knows exactly how Alex Sterling got his start." I stared at the briefcase in his hand, my mind racing through every security protocol, every encrypted file on my network. "What are you talking about? You can't get in." "Can't I?" He tapped the side of the case lightly with his knuckles. "Do you remember the firewall protocols we designed for the original safe house? The ones that relied on biometric voice recognition for the final two-factor authentication? Funny thing about voice recognition, Alex. It learns. And after 20 years of practice, I sound a lot more like you than you realize, especially after filtering out the grime." He stood up straight, holding the briefcase like a trophy. "I'm not here for revenge, Alex, not yet. I'm here for the partnership you stole. You built this empire on lies, and now it's time to pay the toll." He walked to the glass partition and pressed a button on a small, sleek device he pulled from his pocket. A device that looked far too advanced for a janitor's cart. The sound of the main door to my office, the heavy, magnetically sealed oak door, clicked open with a soft thunk. "You have 28 minutes to decide," Mark continued, his eyes boring into mine. "You can walk out of here, leave everything behind, and meet me at the designated location, the old place, corner of 14th and Bleecker, under the cracked clock. Or you can stay and watch the next 20 years of your life dissolve into a very public, very ugly criminal investigation before dawn." He stepped back, nodding toward the open doorway. "The clock is ticking, brother. Don't make me send the cleanup crew for you, too." He turned his back on me again, moving with that strange, deliberate slowness, heading toward the fire exit stairwell he must have accessed earlier. But as he reached the door, he paused one last time, not looking back, but speaking just loud enough for the internal microphone he must have planted to carry his words across the expensive floor. "Oh, and Alex, that little secret investment fund you set up for your daughter's college, the one you thought was completely untraceable, I emptied it this morning. Consider it a down payment on your past." He stepped through the door and the heavy oak swung shut, leaving me alone in the silence, the hum of the lights suddenly sounding like a siren. I looked down at the phone still clutched in my hand, then at the spot where the gray uniform lay on the floor, and finally at the empty space where Mark Davies had been standing. 27 minutes. My career, my reputation, and the entire future I had built for my family were balanced precariously on a 2-decade-old secret, and the ghost I thought I'd buried was now holding the ransom note. I grabbed my keys, adrenaline flooding my system, and sprinted for the door. I had to get to 14th and Bleecker. I had to see the cracked clock. As I burst out of my office and headed for the elevator bank, desperate to reach the street level, the elevator doors slid open on the 42nd floor. Standing inside waiting for the upward trajectory I desperately needed to escape was a woman in a crisp white dress uniform, holding a clipboard, her expression utterly impassive. She wasn't cleaning staff. She was corporate security. And behind her, visible in the mirrored reflection of the elevator wall, was the unmistakable dark silhouette of Mr. Henderson, my boss, stepping out of the adjacent executive suite, looking not angry but deeply disappointed. "Alex," Mr. Henderson said, his voice calm. "Security stopped me in the lobby. They said there was an unauthorized presence on your floor. Perhaps you can explain why you're leaving the building at this hour, right after we received an anonymous tip detailing several significant accounting irregularities linked directly to your Q3 reports. The sight of Mr. Henderson, flanked by the impassive security guard, paralyzed me in the hallway. The air seemed to instantly thin, the sophisticated lighting of the executive floor suddenly feeling like a harsh interrogation lamp. The anonymous tip. It wasn't Mark trying to bankrupt me. It was a full-scale dismantling of my life, executed with the precision of a man who knew every weakness in my armor. Mark hadn't just emptied my daughter's college fund. He had weaponized my entire corporate facade. "Irregularities?" I stammered, clutching my phone so tightly my fingers ached. "That's absurd, sir. I've been working on—" Mr. Henderson cut me off with a weary wave of his hand. "Don't insult my intelligence, Alex. The audit trail for the Shenzhen acquisition is already flagged in compliance. It leads directly to 3 shell corporations that were established just last week, all funded by liquid assets suddenly transferred out of the auxiliary R&D budget you controlled. Funny timing, wouldn't you say, given the phone call I just received from our primary investor expressing grave concerns about your recent expenditure patterns." My mind flashed back to Mark's words. "I'm here for the partnership you stole." He hadn't just threatened to expose the past. He had executed the coup de grace on my future while I was running out to meet him. He was dismantling my present before I could even confront my past. "Sir, I can explain the audit. It's a misunderstanding, a complex hedge against volatility," I pleaded, taking a weak step toward him, trying to project the earnest desperation of a dedicated employee, not a cornered felon. The security guard shifted his weight, subtly blocking the main elevator bank. The fire exit stairwell where Mark had vanished seemed miles away now. "There's nothing to explain, Alex," Henderson said, shaking his head slowly. "The timing of this leak, coupled with the immediate withdrawal of several key international contracts, suggests a coordinated effort. We don't tolerate systemic risk. Security, escort Mr. Sterling out of the building. Effective immediately. All his access is revoked." I was trapped. The elevator was compromised, the stairs were a gamble, and my boss looked at me with the cold finality of a judge passing sentence. I knew then that running to 14th and Bleecker was pointless. Mark had already won the first battle, ensuring I couldn't escape the corporate fall. Defeated, I let my shoulders slump. "Fine," I whispered, dropping the phone onto the marble floor where it shattered under the guard's heavy boot. "I'll go." As the guard placed a firm, professional hand on my elbow, steering me toward a secure exit usually reserved for visiting dignitaries, I saw it again, a subtle signal. On the inside of the guard's wrist, barely visible under the cuff of his pressed uniform sleeve, was the faintest outline of that coiled serpent and rose tattoo. My blood went cold again, but this time it wasn't panic. It was chilling clarity. Mark hadn't just planned an attack. He had infiltrated the very structure of my company. The janitor was the message. The corporate security guard was the executioner. Henderson wasn't delivering the news. He was merely providing the stage. "Wait," I managed, pulling against the guard's grip. My eyes locked on the faint ink. "The meeting at Bleecker Street. It wasn't for me, was it? You needed me here when the axe fell." The security guard didn't react, but Mr. Henderson smiled. A wide, genuine smile that never once reached his eyes. "Bleecker Street. Oh, Alex. That was for the cleanup crew. You see, Mark isn't exactly fond of direct confrontation anymore. He prefers orchestration." Henderson stepped aside, gesturing toward a separate, unmarked door near the executive washrooms. "Mark left a little farewell note for you, Alex. He figured since you enjoyed leaving people behind so much, you might appreciate the irony of leaving the building the same way you started your ascent." As the guard pushed me through the unmarked door, the smell of stale mop water and industrial cleaner hit me, the scent of the janitorial supply closet. Inside, the room was small, dimly lit, and empty, save for a single, freshly wiped-down wooden crate in the center. And sitting atop that crate, neatly folded, was the gray janitor uniform Mark had discarded only minutes before. Pinned to the chest pocket was a folded $20 bill, the exact amount I had stiffed Mark on for cleaning supplies before we started the fraternity's illicit enterprise 2 decades ago. Beneath the 20, scrawled on a scrap of paper, was a single word: balance. The heavy steel door slammed shut behind me, the lock clicking with terminal finality. I was alone in the dark, corporate scaffolding collapsing around me, the ghost of my past having not only reclaimed his debt, but having engineered my own professional annihilation from within. As the faint sound of the elevator ascending, taking Mr. Henderson and the security team away, drifted through the ventilation shaft, I sank onto the crate, the rough fabric of the uniform mocking the smooth Italian wool of the suit I'd shed. It wasn't just the money or the job. It was the knowledge that Mark Davies, the man I left to burn, was now the architect of my ruin, proving that in the Brotherhood some debts are paid not with life, but with the slow, meticulous burning of everything you value.